Hi everyone, welcome to COPE 101. Today we're going to talk about how to get started with a COPE group in your area. We always like to start with a little bit of a COPE game as a way to whet your appetite for the types of things that we talk about and learn about as we become COPE leaders. So the first question is, what does COPE stand for? I'll give you a second to think about that. COPE stands for Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies. The next question has to do with defensible space. How many feet of defensible space do you need to have around your home? And this is a great educational opportunity for you to have in your community. Have one of your fire service folks come out and talk about defensible space. Defensible space should be up to 100 feet from the home, but as you know, in many neighborhoods, homes are closer than that. Ideally, what you want to do is work from the home out. So the first foot around your home, the first 5 feet around your home are really incredibly important. Kind of the opposite of what I think most people think. So you want to start working close to your home and outward. We can talk more about that later. What fire departments respond if there's a fire in your area? This is something that you're going to want to figure out for yourself so that you're ready to go and can start communicating with the fire departments that respond to your area. And you're going to want to get your community connected with those fire officials as well. What is the purpose of the COPE survey? We'll talk about that a little bit in just a moment. But basically, it's a way of having contact information and other information that's important for you to know about your neighbors, so that in the time of an emergency, you know how to get a hold of people, you know what the risks might be at that house. You also might know what kinds of assets they have. They may have a medical personnel there, they may have a source of water there that's important, all kinds of things that you might find out about your neighbors that can be very helpful. What does a red flag warning mean? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that. So red flag warning means that there's very high risk for a fire starting. And that means that the weather is hot, dry, and windy. And those are the kind of three major components of a red flag warning. The National Weather Service is who puts out red flag warnings. And then as COPE leaders, we want to make sure that our neighbors know about red flag warnings so that they're particularly careful on red flag days, but also ready to go in case there is a fire. Name 5 things that should go in your go bag. And I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about that as well. I'm not going to get into the details of what goes in a go bag today, but this is one of the other things that you're going to want to spend time with your neighbors talking about. And as a COPE leader, you're going to want to be able to say what those 5 things are off the top of your head. And of course, go bag is very personal, but those are your essential items that you need to take with you when you need to go quickly. And I want to make sure that you know where your gas shutoff is and that you have a wrench there. Is that something that you already have set up? And what are the various alerts that you have set up to receive on your phone? Ideally, your cell phone. If you don't have a cell phone, you certainly want alerts being sent to your landline. But those are another group of educational activities that you can do with your neighbors, is making sure that they have all these various alerts, because we know that redundancy is super important. All right, so COPE stands for Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies. And I want to share with you a video that was done by the Geyserville Fire Department, now Northern Sonoma County Fire District, with one of our COPE leaders. And this is a video that is on our website and is available for you to use. It's also on YouTube. But I think it's a very compelling story that you can share with neighbors that will incentivize them to become involved in COPE.
It all started on the night of October 8th last year. And a neighbor called us at 3 a.m. and said, "I'm leaving now. You better get up and get out." She said, "There's a big fire in the hills. Go outside and look." So I ran out our back door and looked north, and there was a wall of flames. So I ran back in, told my husband to get up, get dressed, pack a bag. About 15 minutes later, we started to drive down our road, and we lived 2 miles up a dirt road in the hills. And while I was coming down the road, I decided to call 911. I was told that there were other fires that were also happening, and that all of the fire services were already deployed, and thus no one could come and help us. And that's when I knew we were really on our own. The fire actually continued to burn for almost 2 days with very little air support and almost no local firemen. Finally, on about the third day, and all of a sudden we heard this huge plane lumbering through the sky and getting lower and lower. This was the 747 big boy airplane that is deployed to help fight huge forest fires. It released all of this red retardant all on top of the fire and through a swath through the whole front of the ridge. I knew I had to do something differently for the next big emergency. So several of us that lived in the area came down and talked to our Geyserville Fire Department and met with Fire Chief Turbeville about what were our options. And there were several options, but the one that appealed to us the most was called COPE. COPE literally means Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies. But it's better defined as neighbors helping neighbors. It's very simple and easy to do. At this point in time now, about 1 year later, we have 16 volunteers, 10 neighborhood leaders, and I'm the community leader for COPE Northeast Geyserville. It's really a fantastic vehicle that anybody can do. COPE is a way that we can help first responders help us. In an emergency, we all need help, and your closest help is usually your neighbor. It really was disturbing the night of the fire because no one, including myself or my husband, had any idea of what to do, and we had no plan. We were scared, we felt helpless, and it's a very unsettling feeling. But today, and after 1 year of working with COPE and dealing with our neighbors, I feel much more secure and confident in dealing with the next emergency, no matter what it may be. So we need to get prepared. So I ask you, can you cope? Everyone can cope. Just remember, citizens organized to prepare for emergencies. And please, I ask you, commit to COPE.
So, I guess the big next question for you in becoming a COPE leader is why develop a COPE program? What is it about your area that you think is important, and what are the reasons that you're going to present to your neighbors that really support the idea of starting a COPE program in your area? So let me go through some of these with you so that you have them. So it's a very much of a grassroots framework, right? It's really neighbors helping neighbors, and it's a framework that encourages communities to be better prepared. It supports the development of individual response plans. In other words, what are you as an individual, family, household going to do to respond to an emergency? it helps in your development of emergency supply kits and also neighborhood preparedness plans. It's endorsed by many of the local fire departments, and Cal Fire, as well as the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors. The important thing is that we need to be self-reliant, as Margie said in that video. We really need to be able to take care of ourselves. Originally, when I first started this work, it was 3 to 5 days, and now we're hearing something closer to 14 days in the case of some of these very large disastrous fires, and in the case of things like earthquakes. We may need to be prepared much longer than 3 to 5 days. Another thing that's important about a co-program is that you're really providing information to the first responders in your area. And there is nobody that knows your neighborhood as well as you do, that knows your neighbors as well as you do. So that is why it's so important for us to be involved and have that communication with our first responders. And as we all know, it's much easier to prepare for something when we work together. Otherwise, it becomes totally overwhelming, all of the things that we need to do to prepare. So let's do it together. It's just so much easier. And it's really an opportunity to meet your neighbors and really understand what each other's needs are and how we might be able to help each other with our resources. So the mission of COPE is to help residents, families, and neighborhoods become more better prepared and able to respond and recover from emergencies. And that includes, as we just discussed, emergency response plans, an individual emergency supply kit, and really outreaching to your neighbors in your neighborhood. So why does your community need COPE? And a lot of times, we know that we need an emergency preparedness plan because we know we live in high risk areas for fire. So I really encourage you to brainstorm, what are the hazards in your community? What's unique about where you live that you need to know about and address? So let me give you some ideas. It may be who lives there, that people are aging. There may be people in your community who have disabilities, who have children, who don't speak English. It may be the environment that you may live in with steep hillsides. We know that fire likes to travel up hillsides. It may be a windy place. So again, remember we talked about red flags, that wind is really an accelerator for fire. You may have a lot of dense vegetation. Thinking about your area, your environment, what are the things there that are potential hazards? Is it your roads? Are they poorly maintained? Do you have risks for mudslides? Are they narrow? Are there lots of trees and branches that impinge on the road? How about access? Is there only one road in and out? Are there shoulders? Are there dead ends? Do you have abandoned parcels or homes that haven't been maintained that put you at risk? Another risk that people don't think about a lot, because we think about wildfire, right? That it starts somewhere in a remote location and comes towards an area where people live. But the truth is, in some areas, dense housing is a very high risk for fire. So if one house starts on fire, the ability for the fire to spread, especially in the context of the weather that we have that is very high risk for fire, this could happen very quickly. So that dense housing is something that we all need to think about. Poorly accessible homes is another thing. I know a lot of us have neighbors that have gates. There may be 2-mile driveways. Those kinds of things make homes poorly accessible, not having shoulders on the roads that go up to homes. Another risk is having an influx of visitors who may not be aware of the risk for fire and may be engaging in activities that put us at risk for fire. And one of those activities actually is illegal parking. We see people parking in roadways, in narrow roads, there are all kinds of risks that we need to think about in our own neighborhoods, and that, as we all know, power lines are a big issue for many of the wildfires that we've had have been related to the vegetation and close proximity to power lines. And then I can't help but end with really reinforcing the fact that our own homes are a potential hazard in many cases, where we have roofs, venting, siding, lack defensible space, all of those things that we call the aspects of home hardening that put us at risk. So I think we also need to look at our own homes and evaluate that. So, going on to the next slide. So let me just share with you some of the definitions that we use when we talk about COPE. So a resident is really a person who lives or works in a community that we are calling a COPE community. A neighborhood is a section of a community. Ideally, we like to break a community down into smaller neighborhoods. I think in an ideal world, that would be maybe 10 houses or 10 residents in a geographic area. Usually, when a COPE program starts out, it starts out big, with identifying a community, then breaking it into larger neighborhoods and hopefully smaller neighborhoods as the word starts to spread and more people become involved. And again, the community is a region or an area of a fire district. All right. So let me give you an example of a community. So our community is called Fitch Mountain, and the area that we identify as Fitch Mountain is the primarily the unincorporated part of Fitch Mountain, and within that area, we have at this time about 16 COPE neighborhood leaders. So the Fitch Mountain community is broken down into smaller neighborhoods, and those community leaders represent those neighborhoods. So again, a community leader and co-leader. Hopefully, ideally, you really want to have a co-leader. So you want to be able to go on vacation during the summer or during fire season. You want to be able to go and know that somebody else is going to have your back and look over your COPE program for you. So I really recommend that you try to find a co-leader. Again, that comes with time. You may just go ahead and start your COPE program and then get a co-leader at a later point. And then again, the neighborhood leaders are those smaller neighborhoods within the community. So starting a COPE program, you start by organizing these teams, identifying your community leaders and then your neighborhood leaders, making sure that neighbors understand that participation is really voluntary and confidential, and that the information is only shared with first responders in the case of an emergency, and the critical information that they need is given to them. And this is a lot of this is listed on this slide, but the location of gas and electricity shutoffs, water supplies, chainsaws, and of course residents or animals that need special care and assistance. The COPE teams, periodically review emergency plans, evacuation routes, etc. So it's an ongoing assessment that happens over time. So these are the 7 steps of the COPE program, and I'm going to take you through each of these relatively quickly because I think they're pretty self-explanatory, and certainly, we recommend that you join us for one of our COPE office hours, which is the third Tuesday of every month at 3:30 to 5 p.m. And this is being offered right now virtually through Zoom. And we really want to be there to answer your questions and get into the specifics of these 7 steps and supporting you getting started. So, step 1 is really to define the scope of your neighborhood and community. So, really sit down with a map. Say this is where our community is defined, and what makes sense for you in breaking it down into neighborhoods. It might be side streets. It might be, geographically where neighborhoods are located, where groups of homes are located. But you want to start with that. And this is an example of what we did on Fitch Mountain. I just wanted to share this with you to show you some of the neighborhoods that we started with. And this has actually been broken down even further since then. But this is an example to start with. All right. Step two is really to build your neighborhood and community leadership team. Again, getting your 1 to 2 community leaders and then getting your neighborhood leaders going. And they should really be committed to helping with COPE, and you want people to be examples. So they're really folks who are capable of responding during an emergency, and engaging in preparedness activities. The third is to take a survey of your residents, and we'll talk more about that survey form in just a minute here. But we have on the Cope Northern Sonoma County website, we have the Cope handbook and that is all in a Word format. And in that Cope handbook is the survey, and you can take that survey and edit it to meet your needs in your area. We've got lots of different versions to share with you depending upon what your needs are in your area. So that's kind of the cornerstone of COPE, is really that survey. It is that sharing of information so that you know how to help each other when an emergency occurs. So when you get that information, then what you want to do is put together a spreadsheet, so that you can really put it all together, so that the whole community is all on one spreadsheet, and you can share that if you need to in an emergency. And these are really, we again on our website we have that spreadsheet for you that takes the vital information collected from that survey, and you can put it all in one place. Well, usually what we do is have our neighborhood leaders put together a spreadsheet, and then one of the community leaders puts all of the neighborhood spreadsheets together into a master spreadsheet. All right, so the survey information, again, we really want that priority data put on the Excel spreadsheet so that we can share it with fire officials if we need to. Again, it's confidential, and it really only the neighborhood leaders and the community leaders should have access to that information. And it's kept by the COPE leaders, again, to be able to hand off to first responders if needed. So you'd want to put a jump drive that has all of that information on that in your go bag, so that when you go, you have it to share. Another alternative is to have a hard copy. Whatever it is that works for you. This is an example of the form that we use here on Fitch Mountain. And I share this with you because when we started our COPE program, we used the information that was used at Oakmont, which is the group that first started COPE. And we needed to do a lot of editing to the form to fit our area. For instance, in our area, right there at the top, people have many homes on Fitch Mountain that are not their full-time residents. It may be a summer home that's been in the family for generations. It may be a rental. It may be a vacation rental. So we needed to change the form to address that. Another example is the locked gate. This was not on the original form, and our emergency response folks really wanted to make sure that we were gathering information about that. So again, take this, own it, make it your own, make it work for the community that you live in. The fifth step is to identify a meeting site and escape routes. So I will give an example of Mill Creek. This is one road in, 5 Mile Road in, that really is the only one road in and out. So what they did was they developed an evacuation route over private land, and they are able to travel. They now have another route to get out if they need to. And they worked with this neighbor to make this happen, have driven this with the emergency responders for their area. So they're familiar with the road and know the route. So these are the kinds of things that you can do as a part of COPE, is to develop these relationships with neighbors that will make us more successful in evacuating when we need to, and work with first responders, with the fire folks in your area, to make sure that they're aware of these routes. And the sheriff department would be another one, or your police in your area. So this is an example of just a map that we put together for Fitch Mountain. We have one road in and out, and we would decide which way to go depending upon where the fire was. So that's. I know you can't really see the map very well. I just wanted to let you know that that was one of the activities that we engaged in as a COPE community. The sixth step is really to schedule and conduct meetings with residents. So you want residents to know, hey, we're putting together a COPE program. We want you to be involved. You will have your emergency response agencies at that meeting. Start with your fire officials. Most of the fire officials in northern Sonoma County are well aware of COPE now and support it. So they're great support people and understand how it works, so they can help you be successful and help you engage your neighbors so that they become a part of COPE. So another thing that's helpful to have at that meeting is some kind of educational component. So it could be around defensible space, it could be around go bags, it could be around emergency alerts. But you really want to start talking about what is it in our area, in our community, what are the things that we need to address to be more prepared in case of an emergency, whether it's fire, earthquake, whatever it might be, flood. Many places in northern Sonoma County need to worry about flood. And finally, the last step really has to do with maintaining the COPE program, making sure that you're maintaining your kit. I know when June rolled around this year, I was going through my go bag again and making sure that I upgraded and made sure that my medications were there and anything else that needed to be replenished, batteries for a flashlight. I washed all the clothes that were in there. Those are the kinds of things that are super important to do on a yearly basis, just like you would change the batteries in your smoke alarm, those kinds of things. So I think that those are all the that I wanted to say about the steps. So ways that you can get started again is making sure that you're aware of all of the alerts. There's a list here of 3 of them that you can sign up for that are probably the most important. Make sure that you meet folks from your local fire agency. Become familiar with other sources of information like the cameras and the red flag warning, where you get information about that. Prepare your go bag. Invite a home inspection. Invite one of your fire officials to come and look at your home and help you determine where defensible space has been, where you have done a good job with defensible space and where you need some work, and help you with some home hardening interventions. And then again, be a part of organizing COPE activities. And one example is a pre-attack map, which you can work on with your local fire official, making sure that your map of your area really represents what the roads that are there, that the homes that are there are on the map, etc. We were extremely surprised to find that the maps for our local area were not representative of what actually our area looked like. So fire roads, again, roads that were not on the map that should have been on the map, and roads that were on the map that do not exist. Those kinds of things were an important part of what we did, and I encourage you to look at that for you. So, what are the educational needs for your community? Really recommend that you brainstorm with your other COPE leaders and identify those things. You may decide that you want to develop a community wildfire protection plan (CWPP) in conjunction with your community. Again, looking at your risks in your area and what kinds of things you want to work on. And finally, becoming aware of educational resources. There's a ton of really good stuff out there. In fact, you can get very overwhelmed by it. So I've tried to put a number of good educational resources on the Cope Northern Sonoma County website. Again, just check that out. I am still building that out, but there are some things there to whet your appetite. And certainly, once you get your community up and running, be sure and let us know. Again, send us an email to the Cope Northern Sonoma County webmail Gmail address, and I'm happy to put you on the Cope leadership distribution list so that you can know about upcoming meetings and be a part of those meetings and be a part of a larger community of Cope leaders. We do have GroupMe as our notification system, so we share that with the leaders in Northern Sonoma County, that the COPE community leaders are on that GroupMe, and so that we can all communicate with each other if there's an incident that happens up here that we all need to be aware of, and we have first responders on that. So what we usually do is recommend that you have a tiered GroupMe system so that the community leaders are on this leadership GroupMe, and that you in your new community set up a GroupMe so that all of your leaders, your neighborhood leaders, are on a GroupMe and communicate with each other. And then each of the leaders of the neighborhoods have a GroupMe for their neighbors so that they can communicate with their leaders. So again, it's kind of like a phone tree, but it's all through texting. And as you know, there will be exceptions. You'll have neighbors who don't text. But anyway, that is one idea to get you going. All right, so what's next for you? You know, what is it that you and your community need to do next? I leave you with that thought, and just know that we are here to help you. Again, think about coming to COPE office hours. That is posted on our website again, on our events page. There's a calendar there. It's the third Tuesday of every month at 3:30 to 5. So be sure and drop by. Let us know that you're getting started, and we'll be happy to answer your questions and support you in any way that we can. We wish you the best. We're so glad that you're here and that you hung in there with me to the end of the slideshow. So thank you so much, and best of luck to you.
It all started on the night of October 8th last year. And a neighbor called us at 3 a.m. and said, "I'm leaving now. You better get up and get out." She said, "There's a big fire in the hills. Go outside and look." So I ran out our back door and looked north, and there was a wall of flames. So I ran back in, told my husband to get up, get dressed, pack a bag. About 15 minutes later, we started to drive down our road, and we lived 2 miles up a dirt road in the hills. And while I was coming down the road, I decided to call 911. I was told that there were other fires that were also happening and that all of the fire services were already deployed, and thus no one could come and help us. And that's when I knew we were really on our own. The fire actually continued to burn for almost 2 days with very little air support and almost no local firemen. Finally, on about the third day, all of a sudden we heard this huge plane lumbering through the sky and getting lower and lower. This was the 747 big boy airplane that is deployed to help fight huge forest fires. It released all of this red retardant all on top of the fire and through a swath through the whole front of the ridge. I knew I had to do something differently for the next big emergency. So several of us that lived in the area came down and talked to our Geyserville Fire Department and met with Fire Chief Turbeville about what were our options. And there were several options, but the one that appealed to us the most was called COPE. COPE literally means Citizens Organized to Prepare for Emergencies. But it's better defined as neighbors helping neighbors. It's very simple and easy to do. At this point in time now, about 1 year later, we have 16 volunteers, 10 neighborhood leaders, and I'm the community leader for COPE Northeast Geyserville. It's really a fantastic vehicle that anybody can do. COPE is a way that we can help first responders help us. In an emergency, we all need help, and your closest help is usually your neighbor. It really was disturbing the night of the fire because no one, including myself or my husband, had any idea of what to do, and we had no plan. We were scared, we felt helpless, and it's a very unsettling feeling. But today, and after 1 year of working with COPE and dealing with our neighbors, I feel much more secure and confident in dealing with the next emergency, no matter what it may be. So we need to get prepared. So I ask you, can you cope? Everyone can cope. Just remember, citizens organized to prepare for emergencies. And please, I ask you, commit to COPE.